Like most My Hero Academia fans, the first time I read the School Festival arc, I didn't enjoy it. I thought it was such a big step down from the Overhaul arc and then the Raid arc right after it. We are fighting these huge overpowered villains, and now we're focusing on a school festival and a villain with a very underwhelming quirk. I wanted more overhauls, but I got Gentle and La Brava. However, I finally caught up to the anime after stopping at the Overhaul arc, which I don't really know how that happened, but I've been enjoying binging it, so it all works out in the end. And it turns out My Hero Academia is actually really good for most of its runtime. And watching the School Festival arc, it turned me around. It may not be as grand of an arc as the one surrounding it, but it is without a doubt one of the most underrated arcs in the series in terms of both characterization and also giving a moment of relief before the series kicks into some of its most intense arcs. Beginning with the latter point, the School Festival is an arc that takes a foot off the gas for a moment because it knows that once the war begins, it can never end. You can't have a School Festival arc once all hell is broken loose, so instead it acts as one final buffer. There are still stakes, but no one's gonna die. There's just the withering out of the overall arc by giving us a semi-resolution to Aries' arc. And at the very least, seeing Aerie at the School Festival is oodles of relief and joy shot directly in my veins. She's finally allowed to be a kid exploring the world, and it is immensely satisfying. And if that's all the School Festival arc was for, I wouldn't have too much to complain about. But instead, Horikoshi gives us yet another great aspect for the arc in the main villain, Gentle. Gentle is not a strong villain. If you're expecting a bigger fight, then please temper those expectations. What sets Gentle apart is not his fighting ability, but his character. He serves as the first reminder that villains are humans and not these paragons of evil. Basically, every villain in the series before Gentle is this evil guy who's just evil to be evil. You can argue Overhaul has some more depth, but he's also torturing a child, so I don't think he gets a pass on that one. Gentle, however, is the first of many who had a life that twisted them into a villain. There is a reality where we could have seen the villain become the hero, but something broke in them to turn them into a villain. Gentle serves as our introduction to this concept that Horikoshi really plays with in the final act of My Hero Academia. He's the least high-stakes version before we get into characters like Dabi, Toga, Shigaraki, or Twice, but that doesn't mean he's any less good than them. At the core of My Hero Academia is the idea that anyone can be a hero, and Gentle was someone who wanted to be a hero. He tried to step in and be someone that saved people, but ended up hurting the situation for the pro-hero on the scene. He meant well, but it turned out poorly, and that just broke him. Had this moment gone differently, he could have been a hero, but life is not always kind, and so the villain Gentle was born. Admittedly, he's a very low-stakes villain, but a villain nonetheless. He just wanted to leave his mark on history, but does so by being a viral sensation and less of an actual threat. However, Gentle runs into Deku, who is functionally the antithesis to the current form of Gentle. The ensuing act of My Hero Academia is Deku running in to save Bakugo. And instead of yelling at a well-intentioned person, Deku is cultivated into this real hero. And this contrast between Gentle and Deku being one life event apart from turning out the same is what makes the arc so compelling. Deku can't feel fully victorious after defeating Gentle. He can see the world that made Gentle how he is. He empathizes but is upset at how things turned out. Gentle is the first villain to really make Deku question the motivations and life of the villains beyond their bloodlust. He has to see them as human, and it's ultimately the subtle change from facing Gentle that allows Deku to stand against Shigaraki. In their exchanges, Deku begins to see the hurt child in Shigaraki. He sees the child who's afraid of their own power instead of the towering monster who levels a whole city in an instant. And it's this that drives him onwards towards the finish line. Ultimately, Deku probably would have reached the same point either way, but Gentle planted the seed of change in Deku. Some villains are not purely evil, their course of their life made them that way. They are still committing evil deeds, but they're not the evil for the sake of being evil like some of the other villains. Many of the villains just wanted the system and society to change, and it's here that Gentle and characters like Stain re-enter the story. The two major villains who we see have some semblance of a redemption. Stain less so, but he still pops into spur on All Might once again. He's still the hero killer, more literally, but he at least has a moment of good in him for the guy he looked up to and saw as the one real hero. And then there's Gentle, who has almost a full rebound from being a villain. He returns as a hero, one who prevented villains from escaping the broken prism that he did entirely by himself, which is amazing. But then he joins the main fight as a hero, and it feels like the completion of his arc. He may have been a villain, but he was allowed to reflect on his actions and change. He may have fell down the path of the villain, but Deku helped set him straight. Deku and Gentle's fight may not have been the most intense or high stakes, but it spurred two characters to become much better than they were. The former grew to try and dig deeper into the motivations of the villain he faces. The latter realized that he could still be a hero, that he was not beyond saving. The school festival arc is ultimately one of the shortest arcs in My Hero Academia. It's easy to see why people don't like it, but ultimately it's such an important arc in the grand scheme of My Hero Academia. It's a glimpse into the society of the series that reminds us that so many villains could have turned out differently if their lives went just a little bit differently. Gentle's defeat and later redemption reinforce the ethos of the series that anyone can be a hero, even a former villain. The evil deeds will not go away, but people are capable of change and growth. They are still capable of becoming a hero one day.